The young and the restless spoilers. No one in Genoa City had seen it coming, not even those closest to them. For years, Mariah and Tessa had defied the odds. Through chaos, trauma, and heartbreak, they had stood side by side as a symbol of endurance and devotion. But love, even the deepest kind, was never impervious to destruction. Especially when the destruction came not from outside forces, but from the darkness festering within. Mariah had never truly known peace. Not even in the quietest moments. After surviving abduction, betrayal, abandonment, and years of emotional turbulence, she had begun to believe that happiness was something she would always have to fight for. And for a while, she had. She had married the woman of her dreams. They had built a home. They had become mothers. She had found purpose. But then came the trip to France. The unexpected encounter. The drunken night. The man with too many questions and too many assumptions. And the pillow. It hadn't been planned. It hadn't been cold-blooded. But it had been lethal. In the fog of memory, Mariah could still feel the weight of it, the terrifying strength of her hands, the shallow gasps for air, the final twitch beneath her. A moment of fear turned fatal, and in the morning, nothing was the same. She had buried it, figuratively and emotionally. She had boarded the plane home. She had kissed her wife and hugged her child. She had returned to the rhythm of life. But guilt is a persistent ghost. It slips into dreams, into glances, into every quiet second you try to ignore it. And for Mariah, it became a living thing that grew with each day. She told no one. Not even Tessa. At first, she tried to rationalize it. She told herself it was self-defense. That it didn't matter. That it would never come back to haunt her. But when the body was discovered in Nice, and Claire was briefly suspected, and whispers of a mysterious woman in the area began to emerge, Mariah unraveled. Her sense of reality fractured. She became paranoid, withdrawn. She could barely sleep. She flinched when touched. She avoided eye contact, and the warmth she once poured into her marriage began to cool into distant civility. Tessa noticed immediately. The woman she loved, the woman who had once held her with such intensity, had become a stranger. Tessa tried everything: weekend trips, late-night conversations, soft songs, tears. But Mariah wouldn't let her in. Not fully. Not where it mattered. And then came the guitar lessons. Daniel had been grieving in silence since Heather left. He was no stranger to loss, to the slow ache of realizing someone you love has stopped seeing you. He found solace in music, though he didn't play. When he saw Tessa perform at a benefit event, he asked her, hesitantly, if she would teach him. Not for a career, not for anyone else. Just for himself. Tessa agreed. And in those lessons, something unexpected began to form. It wasn't attraction, not at first. It was comfort. Understanding. Shared pain. Tessa opened up about her struggle to reach Mariah, her fears that the woman she married was slipping through her fingers. Daniel listened. He spoke about Heather, about Lucy, about how sometimes people walk away from us before they ever physically leave. They didn't kiss. They didn't flirt. But intimacy is not always born in touch. Sometimes, it grows in silence. In shared glances. In harmony. One afternoon in Chancellor Park, Mariah came to surprise Tessa during one of her lessons with Daniel. She had been wrestling with her secret, considering, just for a moment, that maybe she could tell the truth. That maybe Tessa could carry it with her. But when she arrived and saw them laughing beneath the sunlit canopy, guitars in hand, heads close together, something inside her snapped. Not with rage. Not with jealousy. But with despair. Tessa looked up and saw her standing there. Her face faltered. Daniel turned, offered a polite smile. But Mariah said nothing. She turned and walked away. Tessa followed, calling her name. They ended up at the edge of the park, surrounded by trees and silence, and it was there that the marriage they had built began to truly fracture. Tessa begged for answers. She told Mariah she couldn't keep living in this in-between space. That the person she loved was vanishing, and she didn't know how to hold on. Mariah stared at her, trembling. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't speak. The words were there, "I killed someone," but she couldn't let them out. She only shook her head. "For your safety," Mariah whispered, "I need to go." And with that, she walked away. The separation began as a blur. Tessa moved in with a friend temporarily. Mariah avoided questions from their families. They kept it quiet, but the strain was obvious to those who looked closely. Tessa still taught Daniel. The lessons continued, but the energy had changed. There was something softer between them now, something unspoken, but not unwelcome. One evening, after a particularly emotional lesson where Daniel confessed he feared he would never find love again, Tessa reached out and touched his hand. It lingered. He looked at her, and in that moment, there was a charge neither of them could deny. They didn't act on it. But they knew something had shifted. Meanwhile, Mariah's world darkened. The guilt became unbearable. She saw the dead man in her dreams, in reflections, in strangers on the street. She began to wonder if she would ever be free. She kept her distance from Tessa, believing that silence was the only way to protect her. But each day apart carved deeper wounds. Then came the confrontation. Tessa found her in the park again, sitting alone with a blank expression. She sat beside her and said, simply, "I feel like I'm losing you." Mariah didn't respond. Tessa continued, her voice shaking. "If you don't let me in, if you don't tell me what's going on, I don't think I can stay in this anymore." Mariah turned to her slowly, the weight of weeks, months, crushing her shoulders. "You think I'm shutting you out," she said, "but I'm trying to protect you from something that will ruin you." Tessa stared at her, heartbroken. "I don't care how dark it is. I'd rather face it with you than be locked out." But Mariah just shook her head. "You don't know what I've done. And once you do, you'll never look at me the same." They sat in silence, tears streaming down both their faces. And then Tessa stood. "I love you," she said. "But love can't survive in the dark forever." She walked away. And Mariah stayed behind, buried in guilt, alone. Daniel found Tessa the next day, her eyes red, her voice hollow. He didn't ask what happened. He just sat with her. They talked about music, about grief, about what it meant to lose someone before you ever truly understood them. And when she cried, he held her. It wasn't passion. It wasn't betrayal. But it was beginning. And somewhere across town, in a city built on secrets and second chances, the fault line of a once unshakable marriage had finally split wide open. Whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage, only time would tell. But one thing was certain, in Genoa City, nothing stays buried forever. Especially not a body. Especially not the truth. Daniel Romolati had never imagined that grief could become a second skin. One that clung to him long after the tears dried, long after the condolences faded, and long after the person he had lost had stopped appearing in his dreams. The absence of Heather was no longer a wound, it was an ache woven into every corner of his life, from the empty coffee mug on the kitchen table to the untouched piano in the corner of his loft. The woman who once grounded him, who brought rhythm to his chaos, was gone. And he was left searching for light in a city that only seemed to dim around him. That search had brought him to Tessa. What started as an innocent outlet, an attempt to reconnect with music, with himself, had transformed into something neither of them fully understood. The guitar lessons in Chancellor Park, the shared glances across a fretboard, the brief laughter over missed chords, these weren't just moments of distraction anymore. They had become tether points, small anchors in an emotional sea that threatened to pull them both under. Tessa, whose calm voice and gentle touch had once been exclusively Mariah's, was now Daniel's safe space. And that realization was as terrifying as it was intoxicating. Daniel couldn't help himself. He found reasons to praise her, her patience, her insight, her empathy. He marveled at how she listened without judging, how she knew exactly when to offer comfort and when to say nothing at all. It was everything he missed, everything he craved, everything that Mariah, distant, haunted, unreachable Mariah, could no longer provide. At first, he told himself it was gratitude. But it wasn't long before gratitude turned into need. When Tessa walked into society one evening, Daniel was already seated at the bar, nursing a drink and replaying their last lesson in his mind. The way she had smiled when he finally nailed the transition between chords. The way her fingers had brushed his when handing him the capo. And when he saw her across the room, he didn't just smile. He lit up. His eyes followed her like she was the only real thing in the room. The ache in his chest, once reserved for Heather, had changed shape, name, and presence. She approached, surprised but not uncomfortable. They exchanged pleasantries, but their conversation quickly turned deeper, more vulnerable. Daniel reached for her hand, gently, and told her that maybe they could be distractions for each other, soft places to fall in a world that had turned hard. Tessa didn't pull away, but her silence spoke volumes. She was confused. Caught between loyalty to a wife who had locked her out and the emotional sanctuary that Daniel had become. Danny, so caught up in rediscovering love late in life, was blissfully unaware that his son was walking a path that could unravel someone else's. The irony was cruel. Danny spoke often of fate, of second chances, of finding love after loss. He had no idea that Daniel was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into Tessa's eyes, wondering whether the love he was beginning to feel was worth destroying someone else's home. And then there was Arya. Little Arya Porter Copeland, whose life had once been anchored by the unwavering love of two mothers, was now a child caught in the quiet chaos of separation. She was too young to understand words like distance or trauma or betrayal. All she knew was that Mommy Tessa and Mommy Mariah didn't sleep in the same room anymore. That Mommy Mariah cried a lot, even when she thought Arya wasn't looking. That Mommy Tessa smiled less. She scraped her knee one afternoon at daycare and instinctively cried out for Mariah, the one who used to kneel and kiss every bump and bruise with exaggerated affection. But Mariah wasn't there. Tessa arrived to pick her up instead. And Arya, blinking back tears, whispered, "I wish the other mommy was here too." Tessa hugged her tightly, whispering that everything would be okay. But the truth was, even she didn't believe that anymore. Tessa tried to stay strong, for Arya, for herself. She masked her heartbreak with routines, breakfast, music lessons, story time. But every time Arya asked, "When is Mommy Mariah coming home?" her heart splintered a little more. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know if there would be a home to return to. And Mariah? She was drowning in guilt. The weight of the secret, the man in France, the pillow, the silence, was crushing her. She had convinced herself that leaving was the only way to protect Tessa and Arya. But every time she heard Arya's voice on a voicemail, or smelled her shampoo on the corner of a pillow, she collapsed. She wanted to go back. She wanted to tell the truth. But every time she opened her mouth, the words turned to ash. Her world was shrinking. The friends she once confided in were distant. Sharon was concerned but cautious. Devon checked in but never pushed. And Mariah remained frozen, terrified of the legal consequences, but more terrified of the emotional ones. What would Tessa say if she knew the truth? That the woman she loved had taken a life, covered it up, and walked away? The thought of losing Tessa completely was unbearable. But what Mariah didn't know was that she had already started to lose her, not to anger, not to punishment, but to absence. And Daniel was filling that absence. They hadn't kissed. Not yet. But the space between them was evaporating fast. One night, after a particularly raw guitar session, Tessa found herself sitting on Daniel's couch, her knees tucked beneath her, their wine glasses empty. He looked at her with such softness, such aching tenderness, and whispered, "You don't have to pretend everything's fine with me." Tessa looked down, blinking back tears. For the first time in months, she felt seen. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. She didn't lean in. But she didn't move away when he did. Their lips met for the briefest moment. And then she pulled back. Stunned. Silent. "I can't," she whispered. "I'm still married." Daniel nodded. He didn't press. But the damage had already begun. In Genoa City, lines are drawn and crossed every day. Secrets are currency. Love is fragile. And sometimes, even the purest intentions can shatter lives. Danny Romalotti will soon get down on one knee, believing he is about to reclaim the love of his life. What he doesn't know is that his son might be breaking someone else's in the process. And poor little Aria? All she wants is both her mommies back. But the truth is, they may never find their way to each other again. Because sometimes, the real heartbreak isn't in the explosion, it's in the slow unraveling. And this unraveling has only just begun.